Welcome back. All right, Saturday night for me, Sunday morning as you guys are seeing this video. It is the Power Rankings, and Power Rankings for November the 15th. Although when these go live, it'll be the 16th, so there you go. Number 32 this week, and staying in the same spot as last week, is Nashville. Nashville Preds, tomorrow morning, they are playing against Pittsburgh, trying to sweep the Global Series. For Nashville, they're not bad. And this is what I've been trying to tell people this year, is that we don't really have bad teams this year in the National Hockey League. That may change as we get closer to the trade deadline, absolutely. But at this point, I don't feel like we do. So 32nd Nashville, in previous seasons, probably would have been 29th, 28th. Just at this point, they're 32nd. 31st, dropping one spot from last week, Buffalo. In fact, if they'd lost that game tonight against Detroit, they would have been 32nd. But that win keeps them 31st, so it's too bad for Buffalo, isn't it? They're at the bottom of the East, and I mean, maybe that win against Detroit, maybe it starts some kind of turnaround, but we don't really believe in that turnaround for Buffalo because it's Buffalo. They haven't been in the playoffs in so many years. Number 30, moving up one spot from last week, Calgary. So the Flames inching their way forward. The Flames, I will say, are probably better than their record. Their record is such that it leaves them at the bottom of the standings. I think they're probably better than their record. But that being said, there are lots of discussions about who might be sold and when and what Calgary is going to be going after if they trade Anderson, Kadri, etc. We'll see how it goes. Definitely, there are times where that ends up being overblown and teams don't trade out players, and sometimes they trade out players we don't expect. So, yeah, Calgary number 30 this week. Number 29, same spot as last week, St. Louis Blues. St. Louis Blues are 29th this week, and it has been a tough time. Like tonight, for instance, they're at home against a Vegas team that has been struggling, and they lose the game 4-1 against a Vegas team that's struggling. And keep in mind that of the last 17 NHL games between Friday and tonight, 9 of them went to overtime. So if you don't get a point at all, you are losing ground on teams you're trying to chase down. So tough spot for St. Louis to be in. Number 28, dropping 2 spots from last week, Vancouver. The Canucks, they're in Tampa tomorrow. They have got wins that were unexpected along the way. But if you look at how they're playing, I'm not that confident in Vancouver at this point. I want to be wrong. But yeah, Vancouver's 28th, even though they signed David Kampf today, which came out after news video. Rude. But yeah, I have them at 28th. At least now they've got a center who can play on the penalty kill, which has been part of the reason they're 28th on this board. Number 27, moving up one spot from last week, is Minnesota. Minnesota's getting close to the playoffs. They are. And the weird part is, I don't think Minnesota's playing great hockey. I think, they're getting enough results, they're getting enough points that they're in the hunt for a playoff spot. We'll see if they stay there. But yeah, for Minnesota, they are 27th on this week's Power Rankings. I decided to angle the board the other way. We'll see if that makes any difference to how people's viewing experience is and all that. But I don't know how comfortable I am with this, to be honest. I'm used to angling it the other way, where the bright spot here is on the 1. But anyway, 27 this week's Minnesota. I know. Move along, hockey guy. Stop yammering. Number 26, dropping 4 spots from last week, is Columbus. Blue Jackets don't have a bad record. It's just that I don't have confidence in them to hold the lead. And if they really need a win, I don't know how much I trust them to get it. So that's where we're at with Columbus right now. They're in the bottom row. They haven't been strong enough. And like tonight's game, for instance, against the Rangers, the first half of that game, they had 7 shots? So yeah, Columbus is having its struggles. Hopefully they pull their way out of that and they make the playoffs. Number 25, dropping 1 spot from last week, is San Jose. So I did see some comments last week. I don't normally go in the comments on the Power Rankings. But I did see some comments last week from Sharks fans saying that they should be higher, and they thought 17th or 18th should be the right spot. The tricky part with power rankings is I don't want to overreact to cold streaks and hot streaks. I don't want to overreact and then have just, up 10 spots, down 10 spots. And we'll talk about a team that went up by a lot and dropped by a lot over the last couple of weeks. But San Jose drops 1 spot. I think they're off of that high they were on earlier in the season, earlier being a couple weeks ago. They're still in the mix. There's still that chance that they are playing games that matter into February, March, etc. But yeah, I think we're seeing an experience and probably teams preparing for them a little bit more. Probably teams looking at the record and going, "Oh, they're good. Well, we'd better take them a little more seriously." So we move into the next row, number 24, moving up 3 spots from last week. The Rangers. They did win a game at home. It was against Nashville, but it was a win at home. So it's a start. And for that very reason, the Rangers are out of the bottom row. Now, if the Rangers can start playing consistently well at home, they're going to be in the top 2 rows because their road record's fantastic. It's just that home record's been abysmal. So maybe that game against Nashville gives them that confidence. And next time we see them at home, yeah, and then the Rangers go ahead and move up the board. Number 23, dropping 5 spots from last week, is Philadelphia. The Flyers, it's still kind of the same discussion for me with the Flyers in that if we're looking at the playoff chase down the stretch, I don't know if Philadelphia has enough goals on their roster to stay in a hunt down the stretch. They're playing well at times. Tonight against Dallas, probably not their favorite game of the season. But Dallas is playing really well. I thought that was a good measuring stick for both teams. That shows that the Flyers have a little ways to go to become a playoff team at this stage of the season, but Talkett's getting them enough wins to stay in the hunt, enough points. Number 22. So let's explain. Dropping 13 spots is Toronto. Going into last week's power rankings, Toronto had won, I think it was 3 out of 4. They were playing well. And then they weren't. In fact, they've not looked very good. Tonight against Chicago, I fully expected them to tie that game since every game was going overtime. They did not. They lost in Chicago. They're now without Matthews. Stolarz is on the IR. There are a lot of things working against Toronto right now. So they're in the bottom 2 rows, and they are barely ahead of Buffalo for that final playoff spot. Not really. The final spot in the East, period. And so, yeah, Toronto had a really good run going, fell apart. Now they're right back into uncharted territory. I can't remember the last time they were below 500 19 games into the season, but that's where we're at. And that may very well be who the Toronto Maple Leafs are at this point. And good luck, Brad Treliving, on getting that turned around. Number 21. Why break it? It's working. Ottawa, I know Ottawa fans aren't going to be all that happy to see themselves in 21st for the 3rd straight week. They got shut out at home by LA, and I'm wearing LA, so they had a pretty good week. Ottawa is getting enough points though that they're in the hunt for a playoff spot. They may end up getting it. I'm starting to look at the Atlantic and say they were maybe overrated, and maybe we're going to see 5 Metro teams in the playoffs, because right now, if the playoffs started today, we'd have 5 Metro teams in the playoffs. So for Ottawa, the shutout tonight hurt them, prevented them from moving up. They don't move up, they don't move down. It's just same as it ever was. You guys know. Number 20, moving up 3 spots from last week, Edmonton. Depends on the game with Edmonton. Sometimes they look like they're figuring this out, and other times they look lost. And sometimes in the same game. Points tonight against Carolina, they looked kind of lost. And then other points, they got the goals when they needed them, and then they get the win in overtime. So Edmonton moves up a few spots, and they are one of the more unpredictable teams in the National Hockey League, a league which right now is very unpredictable. Number 19, dropping 5 spots from last week, Detroit. The Detroit Red Wings dropping out of the top 2 rows for the first time this season, and you can't lose a 3-goal lead at home against Buffalo. You just can't. When you're already having struggles with getting wins as it is, that can't happen. So for Detroit, that loss tonight hurt them, but they were already hurting coming into tonight's action as well. So, yeah, 19th for Detroit at this point on the power rankings. Number 18, dropping 1 spot from last week, Washington. Yep, the Capitals. It is a white puck. Thanks for noticing. The Washington Capitals dropped the 1 spot. They are in 18th. I don't know if Washington's going to rally and make the playoffs this year. It's still so early, but the early returns would show that this is a team that's having its struggles. I think they missed Dubois. I think Dubois is being greatly missed by them. And there were some guys who had career years last year that aren't quite having those career years this year, although Tom Wilson's numbers are still quite good. Washington finds themselves 18th this week. Number 17, dropping 4 spots from last week. Utah. Remember when Utah was in the top row? That was 2 weeks ago. They are now in the 3rd row and find themselves in a predicament. A predicament that I don't think we saw coming a couple weeks ago. Where Utah was looking like they were going to be one of the top 3 teams in the Central, no questions asked, and now it's definitely not as certain. There's tons of time left, but Utah's been trending in the wrong direction. They're 4-5-1 in their last 10. It's been a tougher time for them recently. So those are your bottom 2 rows. That's usually where we get the least amount of argument. Number 16, not none. There's never none. I think my favorite is when somebody's in like 28th or 27th, people are like, they should at least be 24th. Okay, it's not a huge difference. Number 16 is Chicago. So Chicago moves up 4 spots from last week. That's pretty good. Chicago Blackhawks, if they make the playoffs, I gonna say right now, let's say that Dallas ends up finishing first in the Central, and the number 2 wild card is Chicago. That would terrify me. Just no pressure. Spencer Knight in net, Bedard up front, Nazar, really young defense, fast team. That could be terrifying. So at any rate, the Chicago Blackhawks are in the top half of the board this late in the season for the first time since, I'm going to go ahead and say 2018, maybe 2017, the last time they were this high on the board this late in a season. Number 15, and I went back and forth on this. Florida gets 15th this week, so they move up 1 spot. So we're at that part of the year now where I look at the overall rankings and I go, no, I don't think that's not right. So for Florida, they're 15th. They're not in a playoff spot right now. I still think Florida's playing pretty well. And that's the thing, where there's so many games going to overtime. The standings are so close. I can't go by the standings. Well, people always complain, oh, the standings, this team's here. I'm not going to go by then go read standings. Power rankings aren't meant to exactly reflect the standings. And I don't watch all of the games just to go look at the standings and go, well, this is where everybody belongs. It would be a very boring power rankings if I did that. And about 6 teams in, people would call me on it, be like, he's just doing the standings. So, yeah, 15th is Florida this week. Number 14, moving up 11 spots from last week, the Kings. The LA Kings move up 11 spots. They are first in the Pacific. They are now starting to play the way that we know LA can. It's not the most exciting hockey. It's low opportunity, low chance, but it works. And when they play that way, they get a lot of points, and so they move up to 14th this week. We'll see if they're able to maintain that. But that 1-0 shutout over Ottawa, they blanketed the Senators when they had to. And again, it is not the most exciting, but it can win you some games. So LA finds themselves 14th this week on the power rankings. Number 13, moving up 6 spots from last week, the Islanders. The Islanders, back-to-back wins in overtime and over tough opponents. I didn't see that coming, so kudos to them for that. The New York Islanders are playing some pretty good hockey. They're never out of a game. Horvat's showing his worth, and I don't hear anybody complaining about his contract right now. Definitely a lot of complaints when he signed it, though, wasn't there? But, the Islanders are playing well. Sorokin seems to be rounding into form as well, which is important for the Islanders if they're going to make the playoffs. And so they're 13th on this week's power rankings. Number 12, same spot as last week. Seattle. The Kraken, this, of course, being from their first season. I went back and forth on whether to use this one or the one that says release the Kraken, but you can't really see the logo very well. Not that you can see it that well if you're on your phone anyways, but yeah, the Seattle Kraken, 12th. I still think Seattle's playing well enough. That's basically it. Seattle's not playing fantastic hockey, but they're playing well enough. They're getting points when they need them. They're still top 3 in the division. They're playing well enough. And that's really all you can ask for if you're a Kraken fan right now, because this team wasn't expected to play well enough to be a playoff team, and yet right now, that's where they're at. Number 11, also in the same spot as last week, is Tampa. Tampa got lit up this week by the New York Rangers, but then they beat Florida today. So they end up in the same spot that they were last week, and for Tampa, maybe having all of your players out with injury works. Maybe that's how they beat Florida today. Maybe having more injury. All kidding aside, impressive win by Tampa today, considering who was out of their lineup and how many were out of their lineup. So they keep 11th spot this week. So we move into the top 10. Number 10, dropping 2 spots from last week, Vegas. Vegas is not in the top row. That homestand did not help them. They find themselves actually below the playoff line in the West. This is where I point out they do have games in hand on teams they're chasing. They did get a win tonight over St. Louis, so there's no reason to really panic with Vegas, but they're not really looking like Vegas right now. The Golden Knights have got to get a little more consistency in their game, and while the comebacks in the third period are fun, they need to have leads earlier. They need to play better earlier in games than what they've been doing. Number 9, the last team not in the first row is a team that was in the first row last week. The Ducks. The Ducks dropped 3 spots. They dropped down to 9th. They haven't looked the same since that game against Colorado, and they looked all right against Colorado on Tuesday. But since then, they have not looked quite as good. And for the Ducks, I'm wondering if they're going to be really good at home and just not good on the road, if that's what we're going to see with the Anaheim Ducks this season. They are still a team that's second in the division, but the losses they suffered this week opened the door for the Kings to pass them. At least whether that's temporarily or not, we'll find out. But yeah, the Ducks are starting to fall back a little bit. Makes sense. These teams that have got off to really good starts that were unexpected, you've got to expect some of them are going to come back to earth. That may be what we're seeing with Anaheim right now. We move into the top row. Number 8, also dropping 3 spots from last week, Winnipeg. So the Jets, the shootout victory tonight against Calgary, I mean, it's fun to see those shootouts for some. I'm not a huge fan of shootouts personally, but at any rate, you shouldn't need a shootout to beat the Flames when you're struggling. You should go out into that game and just, assert yourselves. I do think that Winnipeg is now having those struggles I'd expected earlier in the season. The weird thing being they're having these struggles now that Lowry's back, now that Perfetti's in the lineup. Maybe it's a chemistry issue. I don't know, but Winnipeg finds themselves at the back end of the top row this week. Number 7, same spot as last week, Pittsburgh. They did lose against the Nashville Preds yesterday. Yes, they've had some signs that maybe Pittsburgh's early start is petering out a bit, but I still see them as being a top row team this week anyways. Keeping in mind that Vegas could very well turn things around. The game against St. Louis might be the start of that. Tampa has the possibility to jump in the top 2 rows as well. And the Kings are playing really well. So there's no guarantee Pittsburgh's in the top row, but the game that starts in about 6.5 hours in Stockholm, be interesting to see if they win that or if Nashville wins back-to-backs in the Global Series. I'm not going to be up for that. I'm just saying straight out, I'm not. When this video goes live at 6 a.m. and that game's starting at around that time, I'm still going to be sleeping. I need that. One thing I've learned over the years: prioritize sleep, because I'm not better at my job when I haven't had enough sleep. A lot more takes, a lot more misspeaking, and a lot more of I got to start over. That's too many mistakes. So I don't enjoy that so much. And then I'm always cranky because, Anyways, let's move on to number 6, shall we? Number 6, dropping 4 spots from last week, Montreal. The Canadiens it was a bad week. This happens. I still think they're a good team. I still think, yes, Montreal should be a playoff team this year. I think there are some that are overreacting to the struggles they're having. For instance, tonight, Swayman was a big part of the reason that they lost against Boston. I didn't think Montreal played poorly. I thought Boston, and we'll talk about Boston in a bit here, they just took advantage of their opportunities, as what Boston's been doing. So Montreal drops 4 spots. Moving up 10 spots from last week is Boston. I don't know. I'm absolutely bewildered that Boston's this high up on the board, but they're getting the wins and they're playing well when they need to. This is hard work. This is all about hard work. If you look at the Boston roster and you compare it man for man against, say, Toronto's down here, or Ottawa's, or Detroit's, you're not going to look at Boston's roster and go, well, clearly they're ahead of those other teams. So Marco Sturm has done a ridiculously good job with Boston. He is getting the most out of Kuznetsov that any coach in the NHL has to this point. And Asimon's playing well. Like, there are a lot of guys who are, and I think, you know what? Chanot's actually been all right. So there's that. Smart move hiring Marco Sturm. I think that was a great move by the Boston Bruins. and it is a big part of the reason they're in the top 5 this week. Number 4, same spot as last week, Carolina. The Canes are plugging along. They lost that game in overtime tonight. That's after they won a game last night in overtime against Vancouver, because every game's going to overtime now. So that's just how that works. The Carolina Hurricanes are a good team. We know they're going to have a good record throughout the season, and very likely they'll stay in the top row the whole year. I wouldn't be surprised if they're in the top row the whole year. And then playoff time is where it really matters. I haven't done the video yet, but at some point during the season, because it is fun to talk about, we talk about which teams that are above the playoff line that, yeah, their winning streak's nice and impressive and all, but people are just going to care about playoffs. No matter how well they do in the regular season, playoffs are going to tell whether or not that season's a fail. And I think Carolina is clearly at that point. Third, moving up 7 spots from last week, Dallas. It's cute that people think that I'm just so hard on Dallas. He's so hard on Dallas, you know? It's his team, and no. Dallas wasn't playing a full 60 minutes. They were relying on comebacks far too often, and so they were below teams that weren't relying on the comebacks like they were. Now they're playing like Dallas. They are starting to look like the team that I picked last year to win the Stanley Cup. Spoiler alert, they didn't win. I didn't pick them this year. Because I was like, nah, I'm not picking the same team 2 years in a row, especially when they failed last year. But Dallas is starting to look like a contender again, and that makes things fun, doesn't it? So, yeah, Dallas moves up 7 spots this week, and for people who think that I artificially hold teams back or move teams forward, okay, I don't, but okay. Number 2, dropping 1 spot from last week, New Jersey. They lose Jack Hughes. Jack Hughes is going to be out for 8 weeks. I will not be surprised if New Jersey has their struggles, if this is the highest New Jersey is until his return. If, in other words, they end up dropping to, say, 5th, 8th, maybe they drop into the 11, 12 kind of area with some struggles. And I say that because last year when Jack Hughes was out, it had a huge effect on New Jersey's attack and on how dangerous they were. They just suddenly weren't a dangerous team anymore. So tonight they got a win. That's an important thing. Make sure you get the wins while Hughes is out. We'll see if they keep winning. And number 1, up 2 spots from last week, Colorado. I was not holding Colorado back for any reason either. The Colorado Avalanche have been playing very well. I know that. But they also had some games that they lost where I felt like they frittered away some points. And I know it's extra time. I think part of what happens with the way I rank things and the way other people look at it is they look at a team and go, well, they're losing, but they're getting points. I don't look at it that way. I look at it as this team had a lead, they blew it late, and they lost in overtime. That kind of thing. And so I'm more likely to drop a team down, I think, because of overtime and shootout losses than others. And I may view them differently than others do. And so Colorado's number 1 because there's been no question about them in any of their games recently. And so they've moved their way up to 1st, which is a 6-spot jump over the last 2 weeks. So pretty good for a team that I guess I was holding down. The funny part will be if Colorado now has a bad week and fans are like, now, why did you put us first? You put us first, and now we're not playing well. Why'd you put us first? Okay. If this board had that kind of power, I would just put teams I don't like in the top 5. I'd just be like, I don't like these teams to the top 5. There you go. But I don't do that. At any rate, there you go. Power rankings are done for another week. I'll back off so you guys can see the whole board. I did go with the regular logos for most. I do like changing the pucks out. I know I've been kind of lazy about that this year, but there you go. Let me know your thoughts. Hit like and subscribe in the event you may not have done so already. Thank you guys so much for all your support as always. It's greatly appreciated. I will talk to you again soon.